Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Yonit Arthur. You are on the Steady Coach, and it is always an enormous privilege to bring you success stories. So I am so excited to introduce Manya, from whom today's success story is coming. Now, Manya's diagnoses included POTS and dysautonomia. I know many of you here have diagnoses of PPPD, MDDS, and vestibular migraine, but there are some of you out there on my channel who do have POTS diagnoses, and POTS is another diagnosis that is often associated with chronic dizziness symptoms. So I feel it's so important to give you the opportunity to see success stories from people with the exact same symptoms and the exact same diagnoses that you have, which makes this extra special for me today. Manya is not only someone who has had success in recovering from her POTS and dysautonomia symptoms, she also has a master's in health education, and she is also a health coach herself now, as well as an IFS or internal family systems practitioner. So, as we're talking through her experience, she's going to also be looking at that experience through the very educated lenses that she has now. And we'll touch on topics like lifestyle modifications, the role that food played in her recovery, and then, of course, most importantly, how she finally realized that doing emotional work was really the route to recovery for her. I think you'll learn a lot here. And again, it's so important for you to see people dealing with the exact same things that you are. So this goes out with love to all of you, but especially those of you who have the POTS diagnosis. Please enjoy. And of course, if you enjoy my content, please be sure to like this video, share it, subscribe to my channel. And if you are following this as a podcast, please be sure to follow the podcast, leave me a 5-star rating. All of these things help me reach more people. And if you're here on YouTube, of course, please leave questions, comments below. All right, enjoy. All right, Manya, welcome. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's so nice to meet you. So we just met for the first time about 20 minutes ago, and I don't even know your story. So I'm waiting on the edge of my seat to hear about your journey.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to
Yeah.
share. I haven't really thought about it in depth. I used to keep a log. Like I was so obsessive about my symptoms. I would keep a log of everything daily and then monthly and I haven't thought of any of this in a while. So it'll be
That is
interesting.
the best possible sign. That is the best possible sign. I mean, there it is, guys. If you want to know, am I recovering? Am I really actually moving forward? That's a pretty good sign when you're not tracking anymore.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
So, yeah. So, why don't you start by just telling us a little bit about you? Who's
Yeah,
Manya?
sure. So my name is Manya. I was born in Florida. I lived in Israel or currently live in Israel with my husband for the past 2 years, but we just left because of the war. And so now we're in limbo, hoping to go back soon, but taking a little reprieve right now. I am a certified health education specialist by trade. I got my master's in health education and behavior. That was actually a shift from journalism. I was in journalism school when I got sick, which I'll talk about. And then when I was doing health coaching, I realized that I do not want to just talk about food and food plans. I could just tell there was so much more under the surface. So then I trained in internal family systems, IFS, which I found from my therapist. And that's now what I do, IFS therapy, specializing in food and health. And I work in a food addiction recovery group and private practice.
Excellent. Okay. So, I know those of you listening already know this interview is going to be just a very, very rich source of information because not only do you have these qualifications, you're also someone who personally has been on this journey
Yeah.
of getting better. So, why don't we start from the beginning of your story? So, let's kind of start around where the symptoms started, when they started, and what they were.
Yeah. So looking back after I got sick, I noticed there was stuff going on already in high school. But the real marker was when I was 18, and it was a month into journalism school at Rutgers University, and I just started getting really dizzy. dizzy and lightheaded and orthostatic intolerance, which basically just means blood pooling in the lower half of my body, near fainting spells. So that was really when it all started. You know, I just thinking about it, it was actually this time of year.
Wow. Wow. So how long ago was this then?
I'm 26 now. So what's that, 8 years ago?
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't tell you in advance we were going to be
Okay.
doing math. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you were, I mean, you were basically a kid yourself, brand new to college, and you started having these symptoms. Okay. So how did you handle it at first when this started happening? How did you respond?
Well, obviously, I was freaking out. I think I actually went to the ER once because my heart rate was like going so fast and I was feeling terrible. I just didn't know what to do. Um, and I actually got very lucky. So I went to the Rutgers Health Center, whatever that's called, and I had a really nice PA. And he was the one right away who was like, I think you have POTS. And he sent me to, I think, first a neurologist, who sent me to a cardiologist, who then did the tilt table test, this horrendous test where they strap you to this table and then put you upright to see how fast you pass out or whatever else happens. It was
Yeah.
horrendous. So very quickly, I was diagnosed with POTS.
Wow. Okay. And so I know we're going to get into the symptoms a little bit more shortly, but you got this diagnosis, and how did you respond to that? What did that
Okay.
mean to you?
So I remember when I was at the neurologist, who was the first like doctor I went to, first specialist, and he was like, "How do you feel about this diagnosis?" And I told him, "I don't mind as long as there's a pill to take." And that just shows how entrenched I was. And I was so disconnected from my body and just so entrenched in just the Western medicine. Just take a pill. Don't look at anything else.
Wow. So when he
Yeah.
delivered the news that medical treatment for POTS is really inadequate, what was that like for you to hear?
Right. So it was the very beginning. So I didn't even know that the medications wouldn't really work for me because for some people they do work a little bit. So I wasn't even there yet. I was definitely not in despair mode. I was just like, okay, we'll try the medication. Turns out that he referred me to this cardiologist, and the only medication he knew how to give was this blood pressure medication. And then I kept feeling terrible, and he kept upping it until I was like on this really high dose and feeling terrible because this blood is like rushing to my head and still feeling bad. And then panic starts to set in when it's like
Yeah.
they actually don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So how long did it take for the panic to set in for you? Like,
This was like a few months. I remember winding up back in the hospital once because, again, I was so bad. And I remember getting put on a couple different medications like fludrocortisone, which helps, I think, the kidneys retain salt or something to boost blood volume. And then actually they referred me to this other cardiologist who knew a little more about POTS, and she put me on a beta blocker, which helped super temporarily. So it was very scary. It was very scary to see a sudden decline, or well, sudden and gradual decline that year, just getting worse, and nothing was helping. And all they said, except for the medications, was just eat more salt, drink more water. And you know what that means? More processed food, which we definitely do not need. I was eating like these instant soups and like literally monitoring my salt intake every day because that's what they said, you know?
right, right. Oh gosh. Okay. So again, we're going to talk about the decline you were talking about, but I just can't resist talking about this now since you brought it up.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that for you, even though they were able to get the diagnosis, they put a name on it very quickly. That really the only thing they could offer you is medication and maybe a little bit of lifestyle modification in the direction of eating a lot of salt.
Correct. And in their credit, they did talk about exercise, about building up tone in your body to, I think,
Mhm.
help blood flow, and that did help.
Mhm.
Yeah, they had the other basic POTS lifestyle advice: wear compression stockings. So I got these super tight things that I would wear under pants.
And
So
you were
uncomfortable.
18 when that,
18.
oh my
Yeah,
gosh. Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
And they had actually some wacky advice, like sleep on an incline. Like I got these like bed risers I forgot all about this, to make my bed go slant. I think also to try to condition your body to pump blood better. And I will say the new cardiologist who knew more about POTS, she actually spent a lot of time with me. And I remember her talking about existential living. And I had no idea what that meant, and she didn't explain it. But I think it probably meant something about looking at your life.
Okay. But it almost seems like, I mean, again, as someone with training in health education, I'm sure this is something you see a lot. It almost seems like doctors are reluctant to even use words that might imply that there is stress or anxiety involved. I mean, sometimes they do, and it's very callous, and they used it totally inappropriately, and it makes people feel like they're saying it's all in your head. But then on the other hand, a lot of doctors are afraid to go into, to even ask questions like what was going on in your life. Like they're afraid to go down that road.
Right. Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of them don't have the time. This one actually spent a lot of time with me, but yeah, I don't know why, but they don't.
They don't. Yeah. Okay. So if you could maybe walk us through kind of what life was like during this period of time. So you said the symptoms it sounds like they started with kind of a bang, but then they just got worse. So what was going on?
Well, that first year, it was actually a little up and down. Like I remember going on a family vacation in December to the beach, and I don't know why, maybe I ran out of the medication, but I wasn't taking it, that blood pressure medication, and I felt not great, but I wasn't having dizzy spells. So it was kind of up and down that year. I was still like a little functional. I was still going to class, even though I was getting dizzy in class. And I didn't hit rock bottom until the summer after my freshman year. And I came home, and it makes sense. I always got worse when I went home to Florida. And I used to think like, oh, I must be allergic to something there. But I realized it was just all the unconscious emotional stuff that I wasn't aware of. So then I started having like these weeks of like total nervous system shutdown. I was like just stuck on the couch, like every system you can think of, GI system and brain fog and dizziness and all this. At one point I had insomnia, and I was doing really terribly. And it was in that rock bottom summer that things started to turn around, that we found our first holistic specialist. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. Okay. So again, especially everyone on the channel will be very familiar with how rock bottom things can be, but just kind of want to highlight to people that this is where you were at kind of the lowest point in your journey, that you were on the couch, you were basically debilitated, brain fog, GI issues, you said dizziness. Did you also have vision issues? That's not usually associated with POTS, but I'm just curious.
Oh, I did have blurry vision sometimes.
Mm-hmm. You blurry vision.
Yeah, even when I was like doing the vision test for my driver's license in Israel, I couldn't totally see. And my husband was like, you should get glasses. And I was like, no, just some days my vision is blurry.
Right. Wow. Yeah. What about pain? Did you have any pain, like headaches or body aches or?
Yeah, I had some headaches, but no, it wasn't a lot of pain. And that's why when I actually first started this work, I was a little confused because I was like, I'm not in pain.
You're not in pain. Right. And the word pain is often what people encounter. So at this point, when you kind of hit that low point before you started cleaning up your lifestyle a little bit, because I know that came first, before you found mind-body work, what did this mean for your life? Like, were you able to go back to college? Like, were you able to get out at all? Did you have any kind of social life? Like, what was life like?
Yeah. So the years kind of blur together. I do remember that freshman year of college, I was living in a dorm, and I remember once leaving class because I was just so dizzy sitting in class, and I had to leave early. And every time I had to leave something early, like, I remember also leaving a restaurant early with my boyfriend and his, like, I don't know, some grandparents or something. And I just start crying because it just felt so out of control. Like my life was just going downhill. And I remember also, actually, even before POTS started, I was struggling with depression. And I mean, we could go earlier. I already started some GI stuff and brain fog in college. But yeah, it wasn't until the physical symptoms started like making me miss class, and grocery shopping became really hard. I would have to like hold on tight to the cart because I was so dizzy from, I think, the fluorescent lights and just the big environment. I remember I once asked a professor, this was actually later in college, if I could sit in the windowsill because natural light was better for me. And also,
Mhm.
I think not being stuck in it, like in the middle of, the giant lecture hall, but like on a corner, I figured out was better. And I realized that recently reading Alan Gordon's book, that when you feel trapped, the brain is more likely to go into
Sure.
fight
I
or
was
flight.
thinking that too.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, you're already in that threat response state, right? So,
exactly.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, um, anyways, yeah. So life wasn't great. Again, it's hard to like piece apart the years to remember.
Sure.
I just know it gradually got better, but
Mhm.
like sophomore year, junior year also wasn't great. Like I ended up doing a lot of classes online. Socializing was really hard. Um, I remember it was really hard for my partners because I never knew if I would be able to go out, how long I'd be able to last.
Mhm.
Yeah, everything was really a struggle.
Yeah. Yeah. And how did you respond to this, like from like a mental health perspective, like having these kinds of physical limitations? What was your internal experience like going through this? Were you anxious? Were you depressed? Were you just kind of like, well, this is my new life? Were you resigned? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, there definitely were lots of moments of despair. Like I
Hmm.
don't think this is ever going to get better. A lot of
Hmm.
fear,
Hmm.
uncertainty, not knowing
Yeah.
what was going on, but
Yeah.
also a lot of strength and willpower.
Right.
Like I will get through this. I was like this steamroller. I was like so determined to figure out, how to get better.
Yeah. Okay. And before we move on to some of the lifestyle modifications that helped you, I did want to. I had a couple other symptoms I just wanted to check on. Did you also have some like slurred speech or trouble swallowing or anything really? Yes.
Yeah, so actually starting, because I mentioned some symptoms started mildly when I was still
Hmm.
already in high school. So I started having brain fog and depression my senior year of high school.
Hmm.
And along with that brain fog, I always just associated it with the fogginess, but maybe it's separate. I had some slurred speech. And my mom's a speech therapist. So I used to tell her, like, I feel like my speech is coming out weird. And she's like, nah,
Yeah.
you're fine. You know?
No, that's a POTS or a dysautonomia symptom.
Yeah.
That's why I wanted to ask because I know I think I mentioned this in our email correspondence, but I hear pleas from people on my channel who have POTS and they ask, I need to see people like me who've gotten better. So again, I want to make sure I'm capturing the experience fully so they can see themselves in your story.
Yeah.
So thank you for letting me dig into. I know it's not pleasant to dig into the
No, it's
specifics
okay.
of the symptoms. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah. So
Interesting.
okay, so it sounds like you had family members who were health professionals anyway. So is that what led you to start thinking about nutrition and lifestyle first?
No, actually. We were also entrenched in like the conventional medicine model. No one really
Okay.
thought of it. So it was actually one of my grandpa's colleagues in the real estate world said, hey, everyone was super worried about me. And she was like, hey, I know this holistic practitioner and she's really helped me. And oh, actually, this woman had vertigo. I'm remembering all these associated things.
Hmm.
So I was like, great. So I went to this woman, Shannon Goosen, and she became, the first person to kind of open the doors to lifestyle, that it
Hmm.
actually matters.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I want to, I'll just voice my opinion here in case anyone's listening to this. I don't talk about lifestyle a lot on my channel. I talk about exercise, obviously, and movement as being very important components. I talk about stress specifically. But from my perspective, and again, this is just my observation, it seems like for people who have symptoms that are more like POTS, dysautonomia, that those lifestyle things seem to be a little bit more important than people with more conventional, not PPPD is ever conventional, but PPPD, MDDS, vestibular migraine, these symptom-based diagnoses that have the dizziness or very intense vestibular specific symptoms, that the lifestyle stuff seems to be a lot less important for them than for people who are again experiencing this clear autonomic nervous system dysfunction. And just to highlight this for people who don't know what I'm talking about. So you described actually fainting and passing out. You described
I actually didn't. I just
you
had
didn't,
pre.
but you had the tachycardia. So you had the right? So this, so close to fainting or passing out, this very strong changes in heart rate with postural changes, difficulty swallowing, difficulty speaking clearly. Again, some of these things do overlap, but there are some distinctive patterns associated with dysautonomia that don't occur with PPPD, MDDS, and vestibular migraine. So just clearing that up, because I know some of you out there are not having symptoms like these. So I just want to clarify my position on that in case you're wondering.
Can I add something?
Of course, yes.
Yeah. And also, just to make this relevant for all people with POTS, I remember thinking that, oh, something's wrong with me, that my main symptoms, like sitting in class and having these pre-fainting spells, like feeling my heart go and getting, I don't even know how to describe it, but just like almost losing consciousness, but not, just getting a little out of it and then coming back. And then whenever I looked at the literature on POTS or Googled it, people always talked about when they're standing up, having the main orthostatic intolerance issues. And for me, it was also sitting down.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah. I usually say postural changes for exactly that reason, but, but just being in a particular position can also bring it on. Right. So, yeah. Okay. So let's dig into that. So you saw this practitioner, you started making some changes to your lifestyle, to your nutrition. Things started to improve from there?
Sort of.
Okay.
So she was so important for empowering me, from shifting me from I'm just a victim, this is chronic, it's going to last forever, all we can do is manage your symptoms, which wasn't really working. Which honestly, when I say that, just in my body, I just feel so kind of sick and powerless.
Totally.
That. So when she opened my eyes, and it took a while for me to really realize, oh, wow, food and lifestyle do matter. I thought it was just some hippie nonsense because it seems so countercultural. But once I finally started to accept that, and it still took me like 6 months or so after that, more doing research, really actually researching I decided to write my thesis on ultra processed food and chronic disease. I can talk about that later. But the main thing was empowerment, was you can actually do something about this. And that just, I can feel that in my body too. Just, it was so much more life affirming, rather than being a victim. She said, you're not a victim to the POTS fairies, you can actually move the needle. And so, but it took time. Like, I remember coming home after our first appointment, and when she was explaining to me about real food, and I literally did not know what to eat. And I remember taking out some like Morningstar, there's like chicken nuggets. Those used to be like my go-tos, and eating those with ketchup, and I just didn't know what to eat. And then another appointment, we were like, okay, we're going to stop at a health food store, my mom and I, and see if we can get something better to eat. And it was ridiculous. Like, I didn't know how to just pick out produce and cook it. I remember buying like these frozen sweet potato fries. Like, that was as close as I could get. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was this shift. And honestly, though, it wasn't so difficult for me, thankfully. And my family was on board of switching to the real foods. And that was really the first thing we did.
So switching to the real foods. So again, what I'm picking out of this, and I think this is, again, the message that I really want people to have their radar up about, is that there was this message, not just that, okay, I want to support my body in having the best possible conditions it can, but also a feeling like there's something I can do about this. I'm not just going to have to take medications and just manage this. This is something I can actually feel a lot better from, and there's something I can do about this. So that, I think that you can't really even separate again, it's just my opinion, but it seems like you can't even really separate those two things, that those come together.
Yes. And it's just hearing you talk about it, it's so much more life affirming. I can do something about this. That in itself, I'm sure, is sending safety signals to the body,
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and also notice, it sounds like she sounds just wonderful, because one of the things that I see people get stuck in is they get stuck on like a migraine diet, for example. Right. And it's very disempowering. It's not empowering like, hey, we can support your body to have the absolute best nutrition that it could possibly have so it can heal itself, so you can feel wonderful. It's, you better cut out all these foods, you're going to have more attacks. It's very
Right.
fear-based, it's very disempowering. So
Right.
the way you're describing this, just again, for those of you out there who are thinking about making lifestyle changes, just please notice that component here, how we're both talking about how it feels in our bodies to say,
Right.
wow, there's something I can do about this. This feels good to me to be able to
Right.
take control of this in some way. Yeah.
Yes. And I wanted to talk about this too, because there definitely can be a fear-based component to lifestyle changes. And there still is a little for me. Like, for example, I'm in Cyprus and there's no organic food. And so I can feel this tiny little part in me being freaking out. But it's gotten much better. And, in the past, after the food or along with it, I started looking at, toxins. I started cleaning up, getting more like natural products. And even I went so far as to like buy a shower filter. I was filtering my water, and then I was like reading, you can really go down a rabbit hole. You're reading about the chlorine can hurt our skin microbiome or whatever. So bought a shower filter, and I remember feeling so scared to shower in my grandparents' house without that shower filter. So that is definitely not helpful.
Right. Thank you. Yes. Thank you for making that clear to folks listening. Right. Not to say that we don't want you to be healthy. It's just, as you, if the stress about and anxiety about something are outweighing the potential benefits of avoiding some substance, you're not getting the benefit out of it anymore. So, okay. So you went down kind of the health and, avoiding toxins and changing your lifestyle path. And at what point did you start finding this mind-body idea? Like, at what point did you start to realize there was actually more to it than just, okay, my body is not functioning the way I want it to?
Right. So interestingly, at some point, maybe I was a junior. I want to actually mention something that was really important for my recovery, was acupuncture. That helped rewire my nervous system. Anyway, so that happened like my sophomore year, and then throughout, it was actually kind of an unhealthy relationship. I felt like I had to keep going to this acupuncturist.
That's another, right. It could be wonderful, but also we want to do it with the right intention, right?
Right. But it's still super helpful. Really grateful. Anyways, at some point along there, maybe it was my junior year of college, I don't really remember. My brother was having like severe food allergies, and he was in a very religious community. And so there was some rabbi teacher who was helping people based on Sarno's approach. And I remember, so my brother totally cured himself of really severe food allergies. He could barely eat anything. And so I remember my mom and my grandma were actually kind of interested. So we called in on one of his classes. And I remember being totally not interested. I was like, this does not apply to me. I am not. He wanted you to say the same statement, basically like nothing's wrong with me, blah, blah, blah. He was talking about stress. I was not interested. At that point, I was like, this is so bad. Like there's something wrong with my body. Like there's no way this is in my mind. So I wasn't ready then. But then at some point, I don't know, I was in this holistic world. I was listening to Dr. Hyman videos and all this stuff. And so at some point I was ready for it. And I remember thinking like, I need to meditate, or I need to do something with my brain. And then I discovered, have you heard of DNRS, this brain retraining program?
Yes.
So I did that, and that I actually felt it wasn't enough, but it was huge. And I felt an immediate difference. And it was the first to explain, that your brain is stuck in fight or flight, and even more empowering, because I was obsessing about my symptoms. Like I said, I was keeping a symptom diary. And this helped me be like, no, like I can take control of my life. It was very cognitive based. Like it was very much mind over matter. Like I needed to do more of the emotional work, but it was a very important first step. And by then I was ready for it.
Okay. Excellent. Yeah. Thank you. So I guess let's dig into what you just said, because people ask me about these kinds of neuroplasticity programs, and I tell them the basic foundation is the same idea that I'm talking about in my work. what I find is that, just like you say, it is very cognitive. There isn't necessarily a how did I get here component. There's more of a what do I do about this particular symptom? And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't judge people for going that road, but to me it seems like for healing, especially when, to be honest, a lot of the people watching my channel are people who are suffering from very significant symptoms. They're not like, oh, I have chronic elbow pain. It's really like very debilitating symptoms. It seems like with my group anyway, there's a larger subset of them who need to do emotional work in order to recover. It's not just okay, I need to just react differently to my symptoms and now we're done. So I'm wondering, first of all, if that resonates with you, what I just said.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that program's, I will say though, so the different treatments and different, realms of healing come to us when we need them. So at that point in my life, it wasn't safe enough for me to do the emotional work. So I'm so grateful,
Totally.
that came into my life. She does just Annie, I think her name's Annie Hopper, who does the dynamic neural retraining system. She said specifically, do not go into your trauma. It's just going to perpetuate things. And I disagree.
Right. I disagree also. But again, I'm not anti any specific approach. I just want people to know where I stand and where you stand, again, as someone who is an expert on this, because here you are where you are versus where you were then. That this is why I talk about emotional work on my channel, because it's not just that I'm trying to force you to dig up your traumas for no reason or just for fun. It seems to be necessary for some people to do this.
Right.
So, okay. So how did the emotional work start then? Like, how did you, how'd you get into that?
So, so thanks to DNRS, this was like my senior year of college, and I was confident enough to go to Israel. And that was great. I spent a year in Israel, well, almost a year, because then COVID hit. And I was way overdoing it. I was having still crashes, but at least I was living my life. And while I was in Israel, I got into reading about like beliefs and Bruce Lipton and different brain whatever, all the brain stuff.
Yes.
And he talked about Psych K, this other program for like changing subconscious beliefs. So I did a workshop in the Old City in Jerusalem. It was very magical. And it was so perfect for me because, again, I wasn't ready to do the specific emotional work from my childhood, but this was about changing beliefs without having to go there. So that helped. It did help a lot. And that was, again, really cool. Like the universe brings things to you when you're ready. So that was my first little foray into the subconscious, that the subconscious is actually really important, more important maybe than the conscious mind. Which the brain retraining programs say, like, no, like you just use your conscious mind to, overpower the subconscious. Didn't work for me. Anyways, so then I went home. I met my husband like a month later because he's also from Florida. So we both went home because of COVID, met, got married like 6 months later, which is totally nuts, but it was COVID. And literally, like, as soon as I left the house, my mom's house, and maybe even a little before then, I was starting to get kind of anxious. Things were kind of going a little downhill with my family, which had been like so perfect. And so like, it just seemed like we were this, I really just thought, happy, harmonious family. So I moved out and then like hit with anxiety, depression. And then, I don't even remember how it started, but just things started coming up and I just knew I had to go to therapy. So I started therapy and then just started realizing things, like realizing that I was, codependent. A lot of my relationships with my family and friends were very codependent. I had no boundaries. I did not even know what a boundary was. Never learned how to set one. So that's when it started.
Okay. Yeah. So, and again, no need to share any detail that you'd rather not. Just, I'm curious, what would people look for? So if this was happening to them, if they were in a situation where, as you said, something was surfacing, what would be the signs that something was surfacing?
Right. So I guess it could, it's possible, any mental or emotional symptom, it could be anxiety, depression, panic attacks, anything else happening mentally or even physically, parts, we can talk about IFS, but parts express themselves through the body too. I guess I just knew with the extent of the symptoms I was having, maybe I finally put things together that I felt worse when I was home or at certain people's houses. I don't really remember, but just
Mhm.
any sort of disequilibrium that you
Mhm.
feel could
Mhm.
be, a sign to go deeper.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And because I do think,
Yeah.
as you say, it can be physical symptoms. Sometimes people's physical symptoms start because of some kind of medical issue that really just set them off. But
Right.
then things either get worse or they don't get better, and there's something else going on in their life at the time. So it can be a little tricky. But
Right.
thank you for laying out some of the things people can look
Yeah.
for. Okay. So the stuff started surfacing, and you said, okay, I need to go to therapy. And then more stuff started surfacing. And then what? How did you respond physically as this stuff was starting to surface?
Mm, I still was gradually getting better.
Mhm.
Um, well, at that point, I was still having some of these crashes on the
Mhm.
couch for like a week, but they were gradually getting shorter and shorter. Um, I don't remember responding poorly to therapy, though we weren't doing so much trauma work then. That was kind of more stabilization, especially because shortly after we decided to move to Israel, and then things really blew up with my family. And so, yeah, so it was more just dealing with that. So I don't exactly remember how my
Okay.
symptoms responded then,
Yeah.
but I can tell you that when we moved to Israel, and then I had the space and the safety to do the deeper trauma work, like more memories coming up from childhood, specifically with this type of therapy, internal family systems. I remember reacting to those sessions, like feeling totally wiped out after. And it was actually a similar feeling after an acupuncture session. I would be totally wiped out. And even on my way to therapy or the day of therapy, I remember feeling bad too. So my body was kind of reacting to what we were bringing up, which makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Curious, because this is a question or not a question I get asked. It's really more of a misconception I think people have, and maybe you can clear it up. Um, People have this belief that there's like this one thing that you have to like clear out, and then everything is going to be fine. Like, okay, so I have this single trauma. I need to go back. I need to like, fix that. I'm going to have this huge emotional release, and then I'm going to like walk off into the sunset. So I'm curious if you can comment on what this
Right.
process actually looked like for you.
Yeah. I mean, years. Like I also, my whole recovery journey, I was looking for that single bullet. That's what we're kind of taught in the conventional medical model, to just look for the single bullet that's going to cure you, and you're not going to have to worry about it ever again. And
Right.
it can, yeah, with therapy, it can be the same thing. I'm just going to heal my traumas and then not have to worry about myself. But what therapy and IFS and just recovery in general is teaching us is how to take care of ourselves. And that's going to be a lifelong process. So in IFS, what we're doing is, we're attending to these younger parts of us, from this place of self, this like calm, compassionate center, who we really are. And this isn't just one and done. It's building this relationship, building this presence, so we can take care of ourselves, for life.
Yes. So translating this for people who don't know IFS, and we will talk more about IFS in a moment, but the word that I use all the time, safety. So I mean,
Yeah.
if we wanted to boil it down to one concept that's non-affiliated with any particular method, it's cultivating safety and developing a secure relationship it, between your parts and yourself, or your container and your aspects, however you want to think about it. That's a process that takes time, and as you say, it can be several years. But for anyone like, I'm going to take me years, I can't live like this. You had already said, so between the lifestyle changes, feeling empowered,
Right.
doing some brain retraining, you had already started to live your life again. You were already feeling better. This is what needed to take you to the next level, but you were already living a much higher quality life than you were at that down
Yes.
point, back
Yes.
when you were in your sophomore year, right?
Yeah.
So I just want to make that clear for people. So eh, I've talked recently on an interview about how recovery is not a static thing. You don't just like reach like a magical like recovery point and then it's done. There's an ongoing process of growth and cultivating and maintaining a relationship, a safe relationship with yourself that persists. And again, I don't I don't think it's easy to, I mean, you might be able to point to a particular time when the symptoms go away, but that ongoing relationship needs to continue. So yeah. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
okay. So a little more on the recovery first, and then we'll kind of scoot back over to into IFS. So you went through years of IFS, and then what happened? How are you feeling? Like what
Right.
changed? Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't like using the word recovered because I'm still very much in recovery, taking care of myself. But
Mm-hmm.
what's changed is I am functional, very functional on a daily basis. Like I have a lot more certainty in the sense that most days I wake up and I feel pretty much fine,
Mm-hmm.
and I might have an off day where I feel super sensitive or really tired or, a little lightheaded. Like I'm still working on this, but overall it's just more of certainty, knowing I'm okay, knowing I can take care of myself. And I'm actually shocked in this, Israel has been in a war for the past 3 weeks, and I was sure I would crash like 100% with the rockets overhead and how the amount of stress, but somehow I'm able to contain this experience. And so for me, it's about like building this strong enough container that, which I think has something to do with boundaries, that my body feels safe. So parts can be freaking out, but they know that either A, I'm going to take care of them, B, I think there's two different sides. There's compassion and strength. So like, really like, it's okay. Or just be this strong container and just be like, guys, I got this,
Mm-hmm.
Does
Mm-hmm.
that make sense?
Yes, totally, totally. So again, just to spell this out a little bit more for people who
Yeah.
want this level of detail. So what I'm hearing then is you're not debilitated, you're living your life. Most days you feel good. You do have sensations sometimes still. You're still working on this. You view yourself as still navigating this journey, this recovery path as we talked about. Okay, here's a little bit of a curveball question for you then. So how important is it to you to have no sensations, none of the
Yeah.
POTS sensations at this point?
I don't know. I mean, I guess I could say I'm recovered from POTS because I doubt I would meet the diagnostic criteria. I have no idea. I do not want to do another tilt table test.
Yeah.
But as far as like sensations go, like I still have, I have some back pain, which actually was what brought me back into the mind body work this year.
Yeah.
And so, for example, like the other day, every, I don't know, once in a while, it kind of goes out, and actually my hips look totally out of balance. So I really thought it was structural. And then I realized, no, it's not. And anyway, so I was in pain a couple days ago, but I just stopped. I stopped freaking out about it. Like it hurts, I'm crooked. And then after a day or two, it goes away, so that would be nice to not have back pain at all. This is another important point. During recovery, I used to think that I'm going to get 100% and then I'm going to be able to live my life. And like we said, not worry about my body, run around all day, maybe even eat whatever I want and just have energy and be totally fine. Like for the first 18 years of my life. And what I've been realizing recently was I had hypersensitivities even as a kid. I was very sensitive to heat, to change in routine. And so I'm realizing that maybe the goal isn't to get to this totally stable, almost robotic, everything is fine existence, which I kind of lived, during school and everything, first 18 years when I think I had shoved down some of my sensitivities. But the goal is kind of to attend to myself. And this is a hard one, kind of accept that maybe I have more ups and downs, kind of emotionally, maybe even physically, than most people, like my husband, who's just like the steady rock, which is kind of annoying. And so just accepting where I am. So yes, it would be totally great to not have, pain sensations, but I can't get rid of, I don't think, like my, how my brain was built, sensitivities and,
Mhm.
my emotional life, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and also to be fair, as you said, we tend to forget what things were like before. We tend to forget, like we look back and we don't remember. Actually, I used to get migraines all the time, or I used to have headaches, or my stomach used to bother me. People, especially when they're going through something like dizziness, which is so just so it can be so debilitating and so scary. They look back at their lives before that and they're like, oh, I felt great every day. I was at 100% every day. And I can guarantee you they were not.
Right.
They just don't
Right.
remember it. So I think part of the recovery process is also recalibrating to what your normal is. And you, it's not an objective measure either. So uh, unless you kept a log of exactly how you were feeling when you felt great, there is no way for you to know exactly how you compare to how you were before. So to me, that doesn't seem like a good benchmark. Really, the benchmark is, am I feeling safe in myself? Do I feel safe conducting myself in my life? Do I feel fulfilled? Do I feel like my life has meaning? Do I feel like I have to say no because I don't feel good all the time? Do I wake up dreading the day? Like, if those things have changed, then wonderful. Then that's where we need to be.
Right. Totally. Yeah. And when I was looking back, just wanting to go back to how I was, this is a crazy story. That was, even though I was like physically healthy, I was pretty shut down and unhappy a lot of my childhood. And IFS, we would just say those are, protector parts, trying to prevent me from feeling what was really going on. But I remember, so my senior year of high school, when I was already feeling, I mentioned brain foggy, kind of depressed. I had an interview, and I remember thinking, like, I was like laying on the couch or my bed, like just like scrolling through my computer, just feeling a lot, just really, I don't know, malaise, is that a word? Just really like blah, not great. And I remember thinking as I was getting up, like, oh, I just want my life to look good on the outside. Like, even if I feel like this on the inside, just want to look good. And I'm like, wow, like how sad,
Yeah.
how sad. Yeah. So I feel for her, and I'm grateful that at this point I'm much more about, what's going on the inside, and I'm working on feeling better on the inside, and taking care of what's going on the inside, because we're never going to feel 100% emotionally all the time,
Right.
Yeah. And what's on the outside is less important.
But that attending to the
Right.
inside actually results in physical improvements
Yes.
as well. And that's what people need to understand. Again, I know you are on the same page as I am about that, but just to drive that point home, tending to yourself on the inside, creating safety, creating the relationship with yourself, that's what actually leads to the improvement in the physical symptoms as well. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, thank you. So I'm going to switch gears,
Sure.
but is there any other detail about the recovery that you wanted to share before I start peppering you with therapy and IFS questions?
Um, No, just that it's not easy with you guys, whoever's going through this. And it is possible, really just, it's amazing looking back and seeing all the people that came into my life pointing me in the right direction, each, treatment program, whatever, coming at the exact right time. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And hopefully they'll find this interview with you at exactly the right time for them too, right? So, okay, so now I want to just pick up on a really important thread that you brought up. So, you said that IFS in particular, so again, internal family systems, I've spoken about it on my channel before. It's a therapeutic approach that has a couple very unique aspects to it, but I don't want to get into the nuts and bolts too much over here. But I can link to the interview that you did where you explained IFS. So if anyone wants to look at that, I'll put that in the video description. But one of the things you said was that through doing this, it helped you create a better relationship with your parts. And that creates, again, I called it a sense of safety, but again, that a sense of your container self kind of holding space for the parts. So I was wondering if you could expand on how working with parts in IFS creates safety in the nervous system.
Yeah. Thanks for asking. I mean, the most important thing with IFS, like you said, is attending to ourselves. And, I'm thinking of these sweet little exile parts. Those are the inner children, that are usually locked in different painful, overwhelming scenes in childhood. And And I know it sounds kind of woo-woo, but they're
Yeah, it does, but trust us on this. Yes.
you have to experience it, but they're really
Yeah.
there in your psyche. And right, Dick Schwartz, founder of IFS, says you don't have to go in a deep meditative state. You just start looking inside, and they're there, and just sitting with them and attending to them, and helping them release some of the painful beliefs, burdens that they're carrying. It changes the brain. It releases, I think, some energy in the body. It does something, so that this trauma is loosened. It really has shown in IFS research that it rewires the brain. So learning how to do that, to attend to yourself from this place of compassion, and like I mentioned before, also strength. Self isn't just like compassionate. Self is also courageous and confident. And I'm practicing that side more now, that my life is totally up in the air, and they both are important. That we can't always be like, attending to ourselves constantly. Sometimes we just have to be like, this hard or this strong container, that just letting them know, I got you, we're safe, I'm going to take care of you. I'm
Yeah.
still trying to find that balance, but I think that's an important piece too. Um, and just, this shift into our inner world, that, with these little ones holding so much pain inside, and we take care of them, and then the nervous system relaxes. And just knowing someone's there, someone's on their side. I think all this stuff, I mean, we know it's really stored in our bodies, because when you ask, like, where do you feel this part in your body? You can feel it in your chest, stomach, neck, tightness. Um, so yeah, so I don't know, I can't explain the biology of exactly how it works, but doing the inner work, it really seems to help. Yeah.
Well, I can fill in a little bit of that. So there's research on memory reconsolidation.
Right.
So, and I won't get into neuroscience, again, a little out in my wheelhouse too, but with memory reconsolidation, again, IFS fulfills the requirements for memory reconsolidation to occur. So the memory reconsolidation, and for those of you listening who are like, what the heck is that? It's a scientifically based process through which our implicit memory, so our emotional brains, can be rewired. It's basically how to do neuroplasticity about the things that are really bothering you and really triggering your nervous system to go into danger mode. So IFS is one of the methods that can be used for memory reconsolidation. And what it does, so again, one of the requirements is to be able to activate that circuit in your brain that stores this memory. And that's what Manya is talking about. Again, I'm trying to just translate into dry scientific language for people so they understand. But the idea of an exile, this painful memory, this child part of you, usually child part of you, that is by finding this part of you, this child in you, you're reactivating that circuit in your brain. And when you reactivate that circuit in your brain in a particular sequence, just like you said, Manya, it loosens up the circuit, so it can actually not just be counteracted, which is what many therapy types do. It actually can overwrite that memory. It can rewire that circuit completely, so it no longer has the same emotional charge to it anymore. IFS is really cool. Basically, it's pretty cool. It can do some pretty cool stuff. So yeah. So, and what you're saying, Manya, is that if our lack of safety, lack of strength, courage, again, those qualities that you associate with self energy, if those things are kind of being kind of locked away because we have these very painful memories that are kind of like the clouds in the sky, they're blocking the sun, that when we rewire those particular components, the sun can then emerge. The nervous system has a self-righting instinct. Again, that's a basic assumption of IFS. It's my basic assumption as well here in my work.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is so cool when you do a session and that people just know what to do. Like when you get the parts to separate and you have this self energy and you're interacting with one of these exiles or a protector part, which are exiles are the ones in pain. The protectors are trying to protect you from feeling that pain. So you're working with any parts and you just know what to do when you're have enough of this self energy, and beautiful to see. I mean, the imagery that's inside and how things shift and change, and just the creativity and just knowing what to do. It's really magical.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just in action. It's the
Yeah.
self-writing instinct in action. So I've been very vocal on my channel that there it IFS is not the only type of therapy that that has this kind of memory reconsolidation ability. But one of the things that I love about it is that it's very explicit and upfront about the idea that the nervous system already has this internal healing wisdom, that your brain already knows how to do this. You just need to give it the opportunity to do it. And I love that. That's something that just speaks to me very much.
Yeah. It, and also IFS, it's so, we've been talking about, empowering, life affirming. IFS is so empowering in the sense that, we all have this core self, this, you can call it, some people like to say it's the soul, whatever, the essence, our core essence. It can't be damaged, destroyed, even dirtied, so no matter how much trauma you've been through or what you've done, it's there, and you have access to it, the parts, step aside. And then we all have this like expansive compassion, clarity, curiosity, all the C's of self. So it's so healing. And the goal of IFS therapy is to increase self-leadership. So we're not like building reliance on the therapist, even though I think I'll be going to therapy for life. I think it's very helpful. But it's really increasing our ability to take care of our parts,
Right. And translating that into terms I use a lot: secure relationship with yourself. So because people will say stuff like, okay, well, all this bad stuff's happening around me, I can't reduce my stress.
Right.
And it stress feels very different. And I'm not saying it's all in you and stress doesn't matter. What I'm saying is stress feels very different when you have a strong sense of safety already inside you, just like you illustrated. I mean, right now with what you're going through, the life transitions you're going through right now, it feels very different already having this kind of security and safety inside you in your relationship with yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm building that in process too. And like I said, I'm building more of this like strong container. It feels kind of like more like masculine energy of like I got this, like this strength. And I don't know if it's because I'm just, there's too much going on in here. It's too overwhelming to really sit with each of them. But it's like, we need both that, that more feminine compassion, validating the parts, and we need the strength, that strong container that holds them. So yeah, so I'm grateful for learning that in this experience.
That's a really good point, because people often will ask me, like, okay, so which method is better? Should I be nice to myself, or should I like cheer myself on, be like, hey, you got this, go do it? And the answer is both, and it depends. And this is exactly what we're talking about when we talk about building a relationship with your parts. Again, I'm using a more general building a relationship with yourself, but it's the same thing. How do you determine if a mother is attuned to her baby? Is it because she does the same thing all the time? No, it's because she's noticing how the baby responds, and she's responding dynamically to the baby's needs. So that's the kind of relationship you're trying to build with your nervous system. And sometimes your nervous system's going to need soothing, and sometimes your nervous system is going to need strength. Sometimes your nervous system's going to need a pep talk. Sometimes your nervous system's going to need you to give it a stern but loving talking to. It's going to be different. And so again, the goal is to open a dialogue so you know how to respond and know how to observe what your nervous system is doing in response to you. And that's, again, where parts come in. You can have this relationship, conceptualizing them as parts as well.
Yeah. And just something that's helped me is just being with whatever is. In the past, with all these tools I developed, when I was feeling bad, like I still have periods where a few days I feel kind of down or whatever I'm feeling, anxious, like I would just try to get rid of it, try all the things I can do to get rid of it. And it never actually helped. Like when I finally just accepted it, then maybe something would help. So now it's like, okay, I can be feeling all these feelings and it might feel terrible and I can contain them and they're going to pass, So
Yes.
it's knowing when to intervene and do things and when to just leave things.
Yes. Also incredible points. So that is so wise. You're 100% right. And again, when people hear the word accept, sometimes they think that means, oh, I have to accept I'm going to be like this forever. And that's not what you're saying at all. You're saying, this is how I am right now for now. It doesn't mean anything about 5 minutes from now or a day from now. It just, this is where I'm at right now. Am I right about that?
Oh yeah. Did this like POTS fact sheet in grad school, and one of the tips I wrote was acceptance does not equal complacency. That we
Right.
can accept exactly where we are and still take steps to heal.
Right. Okay. So maybe that's a great place for me to ask you. So again, you shared your story. What advice do you have for people who are dealing with chronic dizziness of any kind, whether that's POTS or from another type?
Yeah. I mean, my main advice is to listen to your gut. I can't tell you that the answer for you is diet or therapy or whatever. Like, it's very personal. So kind of follow your intuition. Where if any of these ideas sounds like something you want to explore, feel free to reach out.
Mhm,
Start looking into that area.
mhm.
Um, like I said, acupuncture was really important. At a certain point in my journey, and yeah. So it's really listening to your gut, which I know is hard when we don't have a lot of experience, and we've been kind of alienated from ourselves for so many years, like I was. But just start listening, and I'm a huge fan of just tuning inside, just starting to see what's going on. I think therapy is super important. um, yeah, I mean, there's some excellent books. Pretty much all I read is like health books, and we could recommend some of them. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think when you make the commitment to start down this healing path, like things come to you. The next right steps. Like, as long as you're walking along the journey.
Also, such an interesting point that you just made, because I often people ask me these questions and it's so clear to me they already know the answer.
Right.
They're not listening to themselves. And again, we're not trying to, again, this isn't kind of a woo, like, oh, it's like magical. You just know, no, but like often what dizziness and related symptoms often are the result of an internal conflict, and not always, but they often are. And it's like, again, a polarization in IFS terms, but it seems to me that often it's not that you don't know what to do, it's that there are things preventing you from doing the thing that needs to happen. So just kind of
Right.
be on the lookout for that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
Great
Yeah.
advice.
Right. Yeah, we have all the wisdom inside of us. And I know that when you're bogged down with these symptoms, it can feel like there's no way out. So if I can put a plug for Alan Gordon's book, The Way Out.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, 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 absolutely. I have recommended it many times before on my channel. Yeah.
And when I talk about also my recovery from chronic illness and also codependency, all I say is, like, it's a shift from just focusing on outside of me, what other people need, to inside of me. Like, what do I need? Like, that shift from external to internal. And obviously both matter, right? The goal is to set boundaries with love. But learning to advocate for myself, stand up for myself, which starts with knowing actually how I feel and what I need, has been one of the most important parts of my recovery. I To the extent that I remember that I used to be really light sensitive. That was one of my main symptoms. Even like sitting in my living room, I would get so dizzy just from sitting on the couch too much with the light. And I remember that I remember doing one IFS session where I was like, what's going on? And I saw these little invaders in my brain, and that's what the light felt like. And so when my boundaries actually improved, my light sensitivity improved.
Wow. 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 Such a great illustration of what you're talking about. Wow. Amazing. And
Yeah.
I can't say that it always happens in such a clear way like that, but here, I mean, very clearly for you, that particular symptom was associated with
Right.
the particular issue. Wow. That's so cool.
Yeah, I think it's just the more our bodies and minds know that we can take care of them, the less they have to shut down. Because in
Bingo.
IFS, we talk about how parts can use our body to fulfill their needs, or distract from pain. But so when I was working with some of my symptoms in therapy, I realized my body was shutting down because it was trying to get me out of different situations that I couldn't say no to.
Wow. Okay. Would you say more about that again? Because just for people who didn't pick this up,
Yeah.
that was really important what you just said.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, like I said, when I used to go home to Florida, I always crashed. For a while, I actually didn't go home, and I thought it was allergens, or I thought it was something environmental. And I realized it was emotional. It was like these different parts that got triggered inside of me, these different exiles. And then protective parts would come in and shut me down, either mentally, so I'd look kind of flat, or often physically. And then I'd be out on the couch. And so when I was working with one of those parts in therapy later, it said like, yeah, you didn't know how to set boundaries. So we had to do something to, get you out of kind of this like enmeshed situation that didn't feel good, that I felt like I always had to be around, and I just didn't know how to stand up for myself and set boundaries. It was just too much, so my body just shut me down.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for expanding on that, because that is a huge, again, you're saying it in IFS language. So, and which I want people to hear, because often they'll say, okay, so practically speaking, okay, so I know my boundaries have something to do with this, but what does that mean? Well, what it means often is something super practical. Like there's a one-to-one relationship between people's inability to set boundaries and physical symptoms. And they'll start again up. At first, you probably wouldn't have noticed this 5 years ago if I had pointed it out. But now that you see it for what it is, it's something you can work on and notice more easily.
Right. And it doesn't mean it's perfect.
No, of course not. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, like we still have to take care of ourselves and, make decisions. Like sometimes some environments just are not good for us,
Yeah.
but the more we know, it's definitely, helps them.
Sure. Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you. So if someone wants to get in touch with you, set up a potential IFS session, or just learn more about your work, where can they do that?
Sure. So you could visit my website. It's www.meetmanya.com. We could put a link in the description.
Sure. I'll put it. Yep.
Sure.
Okay. So so that's the best place. And there's a contact form or something.
Yeah. And also I'm on social media. I'm on Instagram, Manya Ronay. I have a Facebook page, LinkedIn, and I post regular content there as well.
Okay. So I'll put the links to the Instagram and the Facebook and the video description, podcast description as well.
Great.
Okay. Well, brilliant. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me about this. And again, just big message of hope out there now for people who have been waiting patiently for me to talk about POTS and dysautonomia specifically. Evidence right here that you can recover and feel a whole lot better than you're feeling right now. So thank you. Thank you so much, Manya. Thank you. Thanks, all right. Everyone. And folks, thanks for tuning in. Of course, if you have any questions or comments, you can drop them below. I love hearing from you. And you can also like this video, you can share, you can subscribe to my channel. If you're listening to this as a podcast, you can also follow the podcast or leave me a 5-star review if you like it. All of these things help me bring content like this to more people. So thank you all for tuning in, and thank you, Manya. Have a good one, everyone. Bye.